Hello everybody and welcome to our green and lively celebration. I'm Pin.
And I'm Mandy from Secret City Arts, and we are delighted to present to you all the wonderful work that has come in for our Green and Lively project, celebrating the trees around us in the city. We've been so delighted with all the work that has come in, and we really feel as though we've tapped into a connection between humans and the trees that we see through our windows, in our streets, in the parks. And Pin, you are going to start by telling us about the story.
I was indeed. So way back in July, I shared the start of the story of the trees, and it ended with a question, and the responses to that question and that activity have been fantastic. So many rich ideas came in. In fact, one or two actual complete tales came in as well. But what I've done is I've used all the great variety of work and taken bits from here and there and pieced it together in order to make the ending of the story of the trees. And we'll be sharing today, as part of the celebration, the beginning and the ending at various points during the afternoon. So we also had a really special commission well, Mandy's going to tell you about it actually. Mandy, tell us about the special commission.
We're very excited about this. We invited Job Sullivan, an Erdington musician, to write us and to play and record a new piece of music, which he's called The Grove. And he's taken inspiration from the trees and the sounds in the forest. And we've used that music as the sound beneath. Well, Pin, you were going to tell us about what the sound goes with.
I was, and it is so gorgeous. You're in for such a treat with that piece of music. And what we've done is taken it and placed it underneath some visuals that have been made from the artwork that was contributed to the project. So it's a real rich mix of people who have made trees out of a whole range of household and everyday items. So inventive. Watch out for all the different ways people have done that. But also people photographed trees that either had a special meaning or a memory to them, or that were just beautiful. And as if that wasn't enough, people have also been making micro forests out of moss and stones in response to our micro forest moss jar activity. So all that has been put together with Job's absolutely stunning music. So that'll be a real treat for your ears.
And eyes.
And eyes as well. So there's another treat for your ears as part of this. And it is the whisper of lively green. And Mandy's going to tell you all about that.
Well, the Whisper of Lively Green is a poem in 6 sections that has evolved and emerged from the writing and story work that Pin's done, but also from the 2 workshops that I've done on Zoom, where people have written and spoken about the trees that they see through their windows, and the trees that they've known and loved around them and in memory. And there's been a real sense of tapping into the connection that people feel with trees around them. So we have the trees speaking to each other, and the trees speaking to us, and humans talking about trees. And I've taken words from so many people's contributions and woven them into this gorgeous poem in 6 parts that you'll hear in different chunks interwoven through our session this afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, we are pretty much going to be disappearing off in a minute to leave you just to sit back and enjoy all the different work. But we will still be around, but we'll be typing, answering your questions and chatting with you in the chat bar, the little chat bubble that you will find. So do, as we go through, ask us things and we can respond like that.
And we'd like to invite you to join us after all the work's finished, to come and join us for a virtual cup of tea by Zoom. We'll post in the chat an invitation to come and join us, and we hope to chat afterwards. So we hope that you will enjoy all the work of Green and Lively. Goodbye.
See you later. See you later.
Bye.
The Whisper of Lively Green, a Green and Lively collective poem edited by Mandy Ross, Secret City Arts, summer 2020. First whisper, the trees are whispering. Once humans lived in our world, deep in the forest among the trees. Now we're a scattered forest, whispering lively green in your urban squeeze.
Second whisper, lively green through my window. Looking out, a smudge of faraway trees on the edge of the old quarry. Through Mum's window, she tells me on the phone, she sees the treetops. Looking out, angled roofs and derelict buildings, plants and flowers growing through ugliness, choosing to see beauty. Looking out, watching trees through months of sickness, finding strength and reassurance watching them as they watched over me. Branches touch and tap against the glass, rain dripping. Remembering Kenya, rain drenching down the window. Birds, hark, hark. Windows in the present, in the past. Green plants on my windowsill. Lockdown wishes flying in and out.
Third whisper. Trees whisper to humans. Once, humans lived in our world, deep in the forest, among the trees. Now we're a scattered forest, whispering lively green in your urban squeeze. We trees stand still at our own will, rooting and sprouting, exhaling our fill. We move with the wind, we sing with the birds, we dance with the breeze, give voice to the wind. Sometimes we creak like an old ship at sea. Sometimes, parched and longing for rain, we bend with the storm. We colour the seasons green, red, gold with our changing leaves. We know you humans. We hear you moving. We feel your footfall over our roots. Stamp, stomp. We feel your wheels whizzing on the move, restless from place to place. Perhaps you planted us in your garden, park or street, or else we self-seeded in a crack or a corner. Here we stand, in one place but still moving, afraid of the tree destroyer, but still standing tall. We wave to your windows, we peep, we touch, we tap. We see you watching us. We know your fences, walls, roofs, so dead, so silent, they can't grow and sway and rustle like us. We know your wooden doors, our ancestors cut to make them. They close us out. But over your walls we reach, murmuring. We see tendrils of green creeping up the fences that divide us. This is a long game, we whisper.
There was once a little village that was almost big enough to be called a town. And in that village, there lived a man quite a young man, but he had inherited a house. And in the house he had discovered that there were great wooden chests that were full of silver and golden coins, which he began to spend almost immediately. He bought himself fine brocade waistcoats that buttoned with shiny silver buttons. He served guests with drinks in cut glass crystal. And he even acquired a pocket watch that was all the rage and cost a fortune. Now, of course, if you spend money in that kind of way, it soon dwindles to almost nothing at all. And there he discovered one day that there was only one chest left. But he had a plan, and he called it a vision for the future. But he couldn't do it alone. So, on market day, he started a rumour, and it spread from stallholder to stallholder, and from stallholder to customer, and from customer to customer to customer, until everybody was talking about it, of how they could make their fortunes if they met on the edge of the woods at dawn the very next day. Everybody knew that the woods had been important in the development of that little village that was almost a town. Older folks said it was what the town was built on, and in a lot of ways they were right. After all, the houses were timber framed or had wooden floorboards, and it still provided materials that were used to whittle and turn spoons and bowls, and craft stools and benches. It gave fuel for fires, for warmth, and to cook with. And in past times, in the times of grandfathers and great-grandmothers and great-great-grandfathers and great-great-great-grandmothers, acorns were gathered and used to make flour. And although now it had been tamed, divided and coppiced, it still provided a deep, dark green, shady canopy on a hot summer's day. It was full of birds and insects and creatures that ran and scampered over roots and under branches. It was still the kind of place that it was possible to get lost in. So children were told to stick to the paths. And if you went in deep enough, you could feel that there were trees that remembered the time when the land had been covered by wild woods, and you knew that this was a fragment of that. The next morning, a large crowd made its way from the village down to the woods, because there were many that lived there who needed an extra coin or two to feed hungry mouths. And when they arrived, they saw that wealthy young man stood on top of a cart, and the cart was covered in sackcloth. As the crowd settled, he announced, "Who here wishes to make a coin or two?" And he held up a coin and he flipped it up in the air, and it spun over and over and glinted in the morning sunlight. And as it landed in his other hand, a huge cheer from the crowd went up. And so he continued, "Who here isn't afraid of hard work?" Another cheer went up from the crowd. And now he leapt off the cart and he threw back the sackcloth and he revealed that there was row upon row of axes with newly sharpened blades, and he explained. A tree for a coin, of how they would cut down the forest, of how they would sell the timber for profit, and how they would make a road from their village all the way to the next, that they might travel at double quick speed, faster than they had ever been able to before. And another cheer went up from the crowd, and one or two even began to take a step forward. But then, just as the young man had lifted up an axe and made his way to the very edge of the woods and raised it about to strike a tree, a little lad, he pushed his way through to the front, and he wiped his snotty nose on the back of his hand, and he said, "Here, mister, stop. Me nan says you shouldn't cut down that tree because."
Fourth whisper, trees whisper to each other. Our lively green is a family of trees, scattered or clustered or growing in a row, reaching out to our cousins over the fence. We breathe oxygen, reduce noise, we give shelter, we screen the football, we drop our leaves to nourish our roots. Poplar looks up. Willow weeps, that comes naturally. Growing straight or crooked, narrow or branched, just reaching for the light. Our smooth trunks overtake the roofs, swelling, splitting, rushing skywards, our high branches in conversation. We share the sun that warms and the sweet rain. Did it reach your roots? For a moment, dear, but it's slow to arrive, to soften and mulch. We love our saplings, our seeds, our future. Hello, little helicopter seed, what do you need? The world awaits, I am afraid, but my mother gave me wings. Little helicopter, fly on the wind, send your roots into the earth, deep, deeper, slowly, slowly. Acorns fall. Some of you will survive to up, sun, and raise your head. We stand still. Above, below, up and down our backs, small, quick, busy creatures are tickling, hurrying, fluttering, crawling, buzzing, darting, skittering. Still the scampering squirrels are my delight.
Fifth whisper, humans speak of trees. I planted an olive tree for my first wedding anniversary. 10 years on, still no olives, but it makes me happy to remember. 3 hazel trees. Our neighbours brought them back from Southern Ireland. 40 years of growing, cutting back, growing up and up. The squirrels steal and hide the hazelnuts. We never get them. This tree at the cemetery where I visited for Eid. I prayed for a much-loved relative. Many acorns lie where he lays to rest. Quiet rain from the watering can and from heavens above. On long late summer evenings, I climbed the tree at the back of the house to see over the fence, over the hedge, into the other back gardens. Conker's grandchildren. A friend grew a tree from a conker. Now its conkers are planted and grown, giving conkers in my grandson's garden. I walked through a small woodland to the shops or to catch a bus. Often I'd give the tree a little pat in passing, or I'd sit against the trunk, both of us quietly watching people, dogs, squirrels, birds, sometimes foxes. I'd lie under the night sky, listening to the leaves whispering, talking, waving to the night clouds. Wind makes the trees whisper, but poetry doesn't make you money. Once, when I was upset, I sat in the dark against its trunk as long as I could, feeling its strength and stability, feeling if I sat there long enough I'd find my way through what lay in front of me. I think of this tree. Does it remember me?
This is the hawthorn tree, mister. You know, the fairy tree. Mr. Silver Buttons was just about to laugh and scoff at this when he noticed that everybody was nodding. Well, they'd all heard a version of that story of how the hawthorn, the fairy tree, had fairy gold buried at its roots, or that it protected the forest, or brought luck to the town. and that it would be a bad day for anyone that tried to cut it down. At that point, some people simply left and went back to the little town, but their voices carried on the breeze and they rang out as clear as bells. I was already too sad about the idea of chopping down the trees. Of course, don't chop down the trees. They are our companions. Now, Mr. Silver Buttons did not want to lose any more people, so he quickly reached into his pocket and produced 2 coins. 2 coins for 1 tree. Come on, who will follow me? The people that remained, that slightly reduced crowd, followed Mr. Silver Buttons into the cool of the late summer forest. Now, they had not gone very far when he stopped and pointed at a tree. But this was the beech tree, and her branches stretched out wide, and they had sheltered many a weary traveller and their horse. Nobody wanted to chop down the beech tree. And Mr. Silver Buttons didn't want to lose any more people, and so he agreed. Of course, let us not chop down the beech tree. But as they left, he threw back over his shoulder, not yet, anyway. And although the crowd did not hear him, the trees felt it. And the little saplings that grew at the beech tree's roots shivered and shook and passed the message back all the way to the hawthorn tree. The little party journeyed deeper into the forest through the dappled light of summer as it peered through the branches and fell on their faces and their arms. And then they stopped. This one. But an old man, almost bent double with age, came forward and pointed a twisted, gnarled finger towards the trunk. Not this one. That tree held a special memory for him. He had carved his initials into it when he had been a young man. It was the place that he had sat with a young woman who later on became his wife. Mr. Silver Buttons scoffed and laughed. What a ridiculous reason! But others had already come forward. Didn't he realise that this was the sweet chestnut tree? And the sweet chestnuts were not yet ready. It would be a sorry midwinter if there were no chestnuts to roast on the fire. And even Mr. Silver Buttons had to agree. He was rather partial to the odd roast chestnut himself. They would leave the chestnut tree alone. But as they moved off, he muttered to the topmost branches of how they would be back once the fruits had been picked and gathered. And the whisper of the leaves carried that message far and wide across the forest and all the way back to the hawthorn. And as that little party journeyed on, everybody had a reason, a different reason for each of the trees that they passed. And so for a while, Mr. Silver Buttons grew quiet. He needed a tree that would fetch such a good price It would capture their imaginations. And suddenly, there it was before him. It was a great old oak tree. It had stood for more than 100 years. Mr. Silverbuttons knew that this one would fetch an excellent price. My friends, gather round. This is the tree for us. Look, I will give you not 2, not 3, but 4 coins for anybody who will help me chop this one down. 4 coins. That was nothing to be sniffed at all. But everybody shook their heads. Nobody would have any part in chopping down the great old oak. I mean, it would take 50, 60 years for another to even begin to produce acorns. And more than that, this was the tree where the old eagle owl lived. The one, you know, with the 6-foot wingspan. The one that kept the rats down in the village and the forest and the town. And now the afternoon was drawing on, and no one wanted to be left in the forest after dark. So they all made their way back home to the little village, the almost town. Now you'd think that that would be an end of things, but it wasn't, because Mr. Silverbuttons had learned nothing at all. In fact, the next morning he proved himself to be less wise than he had been the day before. He got up with a new plan. He would cut down that hawthorn tree. That would show everybody, and then they would all be on his side. They would all work for him, and before he knew where he was, he would be rich and the forest would be felled. He would lead by example. And so he made his way in his horse and his cart with his axe in the back, down to the woods once more. He smirked at the hawthorn, and he began to chop and chop away. And he listed all of the trees that he would cut down. And when that hawthorn fell, he saw that there was no fairy gold at its roots. And so he began to slice it up into firewood. It would burn well in his hearth that winter. He could roast chestnuts on it. In fact, he could almost smell the fire now, the smoke in his nostrils. He made his way back to that little town, and as he arrived just as the sun set and the moon rose, he saw that people ran backwards and forwards and back, each carrying buckets of water. And there before him, his house was ablaze. And eventually there was just cinder and ash. Everybody felt sorry for him until they looked in the back of his cart and saw the hawthorn chopped up into tiny little bits. They said, well, that's what you get when you mess with the woods that were once the wild woods and are still a fragment of that.
Sixth whisper, trees' gifts to the humans. Oranges and lemons, apples and pears, cherries, plums and damsons, hazelnuts, almonds, coconut, dates, walnut, chocolate, and sweet chestnuts for Christmas. Remembering huge jackfruit with fat round seeds and guava the size of an apple. Elder growing rampantly, flowers, then berries, elderflower cordial fizzing into wine. Orchards of apple trees with gifts of fruit for thankful hands. Twisted willow where a swing swung. Silver birch, aspen creaking and murmuring, beech and fir broad and comforting. All our gifts. Cooling shadow on the warmest of days, branches spread out like skirts, deep carpets of fallen leaves, peace and shade for writing. Look, whisper the trees, look really close. Always something new, changing and growing, our slow green calm between earth and sky. Centuries of rustling grace, breathing light. Once humans lived in our world, deep in the forest among the trees. Now we're a scattered forest, whispering lively green in your urban squeeze.